Hey, everybody, welcome to a special episode of Truth or Trend. Dr. V is on vacation, so I have the great pleasure of having this morning with an alive and happy and healthy human, Dr. Lauren Nappen. We met a few months ago. I was teaching, was it the thyroid seminar? Or was it the mental? I think it was the mental health seminar.
Mental health. Yep.
Yeah, and we just
Yes,
had
indeed.
to have a much longer conversation because one of the things that we had in common and understood is the importance of addressing the emotional component to healing. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that I got Dr. Lauren on the call today, because so many times in so many instances you do everything right with somebody structurally, or you've got all their chemistry right, and you know that their food is locked in, but they're just not getting the results. And oftentimes it's because they have some internal belief that is slowing them down, something that is making them continue to make bad choices, something that is just keeping them from being their most vibrant health. And finding people who have modalities that are non-invasive and non-aggressive and just simple and elegant to help people get relief in that category are so important. And so that's why I want to hear more about what you were just about to tell me before. And I said, no, we gotta tell everybody that. Uh, because when I started, I believe my whole success in my practice was because I spent most of my time just listening to people. I feel like people didn't even come to listen to what I had to say about nutrition. They just wanted someone to listen to them. And you had just said before, what, you spend 5 minutes on nutrition and then what?
Yeah, and the rest of the session is literally listening. So people will schedule an appointment with me and they go, "Oh yeah, I want to do my nutrition. I want to do this." Okay, great. So we set that time aside. They come in, they sit in what I refer to in my office as the crying chair,
Yeah, okay.
because because that's eventually what happens there.
Sure.
Um, we could call it the change chair, but I think it's okay to call it the crying chair so people get some resonance and some comfortable relationship with tears.
Yes.
And so in that session, they will just start yapping away, and the story just keeps meandering. And then by the time we're done, I look at my watch and I go, "Oh, we got 5 minutes to do nutrition," and then it is
Well, it's so
quick.
true. Let's talk more about that tears thing, because I talk about that a lot. I mean, people often walk out of my office in tears, and so
Mm-hmm,
they're like, "Oh, every time I see you, I cry." And I'm
mm-hmm.
like, "Well, where else are you allowed to cry? Where else is there a safe space for that to happen? This is a normal way of your body responding and releasing hormones and chemicals, and
Mm-hmm.
it's totally healthy. And the fact that you can provide that space for somebody is clearly healing them, right?
Yeah, I find it fascinating all the ways that we hold back.
Mm,
And so, whenever we're going to go and address something that's going on in the physical body, because that's most acceptable, right? Even in a chiropractic world, um, the only way people get to a chiropractor is because their back hurts in some way, shape, or form, and the focus is on that trajectory.
mm,
And we forget that we are multidimensional beings. We live through a variety of experiences,
mhm.
and so when I look at my facilitation on the planet, your facilitation, what the next generation of healers, regardless of what we call ourselves, what our responsibility is to be multidimensional,
Mm,
is to be able to tune in. We may have an expertise in one way or the other, but to be in a space of presence with people,
mm,
whew, there's not a lot of people who have that experience.
right.
So when they walk in and they sit down, it's an eye to eye, it's a heart to heart. They're not used to this level of relationship with any practitioner, whether you call it MD or healer, whatever that gamut is.
Mm,
And even our practitioners, I don't think, are comfortable with that relationship.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I would
It's
agree with that. I would
it's
absolutely.
very sacred to just sit. So if somebody walks into my office, well, first off, they're really brave to walk into my office. So we just
Give them credit for credit's due, right?
give them credit for showing up, because if you haven't cried in the first 5 minutes and somehow I missed something. So, and,
Nice.
but I think it's a wonderful thing to just go, let's just get to the deepest worry you have, because once we rise that up, clear that out, then we can look at what level are we going to start with.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example. I just had a session with somebody virtually yesterday. Yeah, yesterday on Sunday. She's a lovely woman. She took Bach flower essences with me.
Hmm.
Um,
Which can be very helpful in a smooth transition into an emotional healing. Sure.
Beautiful way to use
Yeah.
those. I've been using them since I was in high school. She Blood pressure is an issue for her, and she just doesn't really want to take it.
Mm. Hmm.
And she may need some assistance. She is on nutrition. She's working with a lot of um, functional medicine practitioners on the medical side, on the non-medical side. We do some things here with flower essences. And yesterday, we thought we would go into core transformation. And when we tried to do that, it was amazing how even just getting through parts of core transformation, which is a way of working that psychic material that world, and working with parts and going, what part of you has the problem with blood pressure?
Mm.
And all of a sudden, just asking her one question after another. And when she got more engaged frontal lobe wise, right? So she had to be in the thing. I brought her out of it and we started chatting. And eventually, what it turned out was she was afraid of losing, of not surviving, of not being on the planet, of having a reaction to medicine, and not wanting to leave her children behind in this world.
Mm.
That was the thing that was interfering with her just simply gathering information, such as what's your
Sure.
blood pressure doing today?
Wow. Wow.
And her children are grown. So we have all kinds of interesting reasons for why we don't want to do something.
Okay. Okay.
And once we brought that to the surface for her, I said, next week you're just going to experiment and take your blood pressure and have a good time. It's just information. That's all
Yeah.
it is.
Interesting. And I find it interesting that someone like her spends so much energy on something that hasn't happened or doesn't happen, right? We get kind of programmed or led into this thought of being worried about people when we're gone or whatever,
Yes.
which is unfortunately, there's just no value to that thought. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's value if it motivates you to get a trust made or get your affairs in order. But other than that, it's a lot of time spent that you could have been spent calling them or sending them love or some kind of message. You know what I mean? And people do. They get overwhelmed by these emotions, and to be able to help them bring it back to balance like that is so helpful.
Yeah, truly is. I think that's probably 90% of the work that I do. And I think as a practitioner and a healing artist, um, just being present with somebody becomes
Mm.
important. Just really being in that presence because it's a rarity.
Yeah. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh. It's funny you say, because a gentleman just last week said that exact thing to me. He goes, it's rare I can have a conversation and I feel like somebody's really hearing me. We're really talking. And there's so much healing in that. And I don't know how to repeat that over and over. And I wonder what it is that has made it hard for people to be present, right? Um,
Well, I mean, if you look at history, we've looked at the physical structure, we've looked at disease processes, we tease them out. It becomes more about mechanics.
mm,
And we forget that there's an intelligence in this process, that there's that special substance that you can't really pinpoint, that life force that's part of the glue.
yeah,
And
yeah.
until we start to pay attention to all the signs and how people communicate, we're going to continue to do what's most comfortable, which is mechanical work,
Mm,
whether it's an adjustment, whether it's nutrition, whether it's diagnostics in the medical field, whatever all of that is. If we get too physically oriented, that we forget that there's a bunch of other parts of ourselves that are involved in how that physicality responds and how we created that disease process, how we create that wellness process, we miss a whole part of how we operate in the world.
So how do you find if somebody's listening to this out there, right? And they are struggling with their health, how do you let them know that that's the piece that needs to be focused on? Or is it just almost always find someone to help you with that piece? I mean, you know what I mean? What would be the first step for that person out there?
Well, I would hope that they would have a healer in their back pocket,
Yeah, of course.
somebody who does the listening. I would hope
Yeah.
that when they walk into a practitioner's office, you know at least the questions you want to ask somebody, because maybe somebody is just going, I just want this to go away. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe we ask different questions.
Oh,
You know, how
absolutely.
else can we take care of me so that all of me is getting cared for?
Yes.
And that's the story has been in our culture for a long time. So we don't even know that we're allowed to ask those questions. You know, so if my physical body, if I'm, you know, we just go, well, what's meet the person where the person's at and what do they want from this? What's in it for them kind of mentality. And the person says, well, I just want to get back out on the golf course. Or I just had somebody who bought a car, and it was a very nice car, and she had buyer's remorse.
Mm, okay.
And we just started talking about what the buyer's remorse was because her golf game was off as a result.
Okay.
So you never know how people have
Sure.
things hooked up, or how that non-alignment with yourself shows up
Mm,
in what you do in the world. And if we have non-alignment for a long enough period of time, so you want a practitioner who's going to ask different questions,
mm-hmm. Well,
right?
I would
So
say that the quality of the questions we ask determine the quality of our outcomes in life, quality of our relationships, quality of the
mhm.
outcomes for your patients. And it's funny you say that because I put a lot of time and attention on the questions around.
Yes.
In fact, I say this all the time. We don't, I had a swear jar for a little while. I need to reinstate it. Whenever anybody would ask, how are you? Right?
Uh-huh.
Because it's most of the time it's a complete programmed question and response. There's no
Mhm.
real connection there in it.
Mhm.
And it's always, hi, how are you? How are you? I'm fine.
Uh-huh.
How are you? Right. And it's just wasted time as far as I'm concerned. So we put a lot of attention here on what are the better questions we can ask when people walk in. And
Mhm.
in fact, in my intake, when they come back, there's always a question at the bottom that says, what are you looking forward to this week?
Yeah.
And if people can't answer that question, okay, that's what we're talking about. Right? You have to
Mhm.
have something to look forward to in life. Or, what is something, the very specific questions that help put them in a brain space that is focused on enjoying life. Like
Mhm.
what did you do last week that you enjoyed the most? Things like that. And it's shocking and it's heartbreaking when people leave that blank and they just can't come up with anything.
Well, because we have one trajectory on the planet, and it's trying to figure out how to do life from 7 in the morning till 7 at night and
Mm.
get as much done as possible without necessarily participating in it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's just
Um,
things on a checklist, and that's a world problem.
mm, mm,
It's a family problem, it's a culture problem, it's a world problem.
mm, right. And when you were saying earlier about people saying, I just want this to go away, also is a hook for me
Mm-hmm.
because what I also find is people are very clear about what they don't want. They
Uh-huh.
a lot
Yes.
of times saying, I don't want to be in pain. I don't want that to happen. I don't. And all this energy on that. And they have no idea what the opposite of that would be. Like, what is it that you do want? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
always trying to remind people, you can't get into a cab and tell him, don't take me to McDonald's, right? You can't give somebody a negative command.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be doing something, right? So you have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what that is. What is the destination that you want? So if you are stuck on that and you know what you don't want, I would encourage you to spend some time or have somebody talk through with you what is the opposite of that, right? And then you have something to move towards. It's so much more powerful to have something to move
Well,
towards.
and just even people having the permission that they're allowed to even question what that could be for themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's just something we learn as we mature and grow, and all
Mm.
we follow a trajectory because that's what we've been given, right? You can't go and ask a 10-year-old to have a wisdom of 40-year-old. If a 40-year-old is expressing wisdom or not is another question. However, right, we have to put that in alignment with what expectations are appropriate at that given point in time.
Mm.
And we
Hmm.
don't always do that with people, but if people don't even know that they're allowed to ask different questions,
Hmm.
um, and the system itself, we talk about the system being broken. So how do we bring more humanity back into caring for ourselves?
Yeah.
How do we remember that caring for ourselves is an inside out job?
Mm, mm.
It's not an out, we may seek for assistance. But when we remember that it's really an inside out job, how are we showing up? Where's our willingness point? Because oftentimes, you will see people who will show up and they're doing this. Yes, I'm
Yep.
willing, and no.
Right.
And then when they do that, I just go, could you please just put a heart on that hand when you're doing that?
I got so many questions for you. I mean, because clearly you've been doing this a while. You probably have over 10,000 hours. Which would make you, world class at being able to figure out what's the
Oh,
next
that's so sweet.
that. But somebody who's starting out, right? Somebody who maybe they've just graduated and they're trying to integrate this into their practice. What would be the first things that you would give them? What would be the first tools? Like maybe there's a question you would have them ask everybody, but what would you give them advice to do?
Well, first, I would have them get comfortable with their own emotional experience.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay. Yep.
You know,
Very
what
good.
is what is their reason? What's their reason for being, and why do they want to be in the world doing this work?
Yeah.
Why
Wow.
in the world do this work?
Isn't that overwhelming for people though to ask that? It's a very good
Hugely,
question. Yeah.
hugely.
Yeah. Okay.
When I went into, I think it's important though. When I went to chiropractic school, so I had a very strange, I had the long route for undergraduate because I couldn't figure out what to do with myself. Um, and I couldn't figure out why they would say, well, you need to pick a major. And I was like, what the F4, if I don't know what I'm doing, or
Fair
more
point.
importantly, why I'm doing it.
Right. Right.
And
Mhm.
at some point, my chiropractor, she said to me, she said, well, in the meantime, why don't you become a chiropractor?
Huh.
And I was like, huh, all righty then. I'll,
Okay.
I'll go do that. So in that moment, I made a decision, right? I just made a decision. I drove to South Carolina. I got to chiropractic school. And when I walked in the door, so when you talk about having a more open spiritual current inside of you, that's also part of what you want to have as somebody who's going to be a healing facilitator, not just a mechanic in the healing arts.
Right. Yes.
It's an art. You need to know that that spiritual
Mhm.
self is open, that there's permission for you to listen to what your soul trajectory is. And even if those words feel out of sorts for you, you allow that in as a vocabulary. Because
Mm.
when I walked into chiropractic school, let's see, I'm 31 years graduated, so 35 years ago, I walked in and I saw the sign that said chiropractic was about uniting man the physical with man the spiritual.
Wow. Which school was this?
This
In
was Sherman down in
German.
South Carolina.
Okay. Wow.
And it was part of the philosophy that most people do not know much about chiropractic philosophy.
Right.
And I saw that. I had chills. I went, oh, that's why I'm here. It was
Wow.
clear as day.
Wow.
So
Okay.
to allow yourself to be open to remembering why you decided to go do something
Mm. Mm.
beyond just how am I going to make a living? How am I going to support
Sure.
myself? Right? Because if we allow survival to be the only thing we live from, okay, I got to get a job, I got to do this. Well, yeah, all of us have to figure that step out.
Sure.
So if you allow yourself, in addition to figuring that step out, have it be something that your soul says this will be meaningful for you.
Mm.
When you create the open door for meaning, then you can have meaningful conversations.
Mm. So, okay, I'm gonna
Okay.
springboard off of that, and
Yep.
I have a lot of people, of course, that I'm trying to support in every way I can, and I do have some executives who feel like they have gotten handcuffed, right, to
Oh,
the
yeah.
job, and they don't feel that purpose. What would be the first steps for them to be able to move, from that to transition to something that did have a lot more purpose to them? Because purpose is one of the power nine for the blue zones, right? If you want longevity, there has to be purpose. It's always there when we have that. So what advice
Yeah.
would you give that
So,
person?
one of my favorite tools in terms of the energetic healing arts and body arts, well, there's several of my favorite tools. right? Pretty much, I love all of them. But the ones I use here very much so are flower essences, because they're a great way of taking the edge off of very structured ways of viewing the world.
Let me grab something here real quick because
Okie dokie.
when you said
Yeah.
that earlier, I wanted so badly to go get this. My very first guest on this was Dr. Virginia Irby, and I still have the flower essence that she created for me when I was there. And what an art, right? Where she blended this and this and this.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different ones in here. And when I, take this little essence,
Yeah, it is.
there's so many. I mean, it could be placebo. It is placebo on top of whatever's in there for sure for me. But please talk more about that.
So flower essence, I love it. And think about it. If we go out into nature, it's pretty popular. You have books on grounding and all of those kinds of things. Go walk in your bare feet, which is, I've walked in my bare feet since I was a kid. So I really don't like to have shoes. I don't work in shoes. Thank God I don't work for a company, because that would just be I'm not doing that. Be in my bare feet. When we go out into nature, there is a communication. We do calm down when we get into nature.
Oh, yeah.
So, in those places where you might want to call it placebo, it's really not.
Sure.
Your chemistry changes when you breathe, when you visually take something in. That Greek word aesthesis, when you just take something in that's bigger than you and experience it.
Oh, wait a minute. Hit me with that word one more time. This is the word of the week.
No, it's a good one. Aisthesis, AISTH, something, something, something. I can't spell it.
Oh, okay.
It's a Greek word. It's for power. It's for something bigger than you. Which is what we're searching for, to be in relationship with.
Yes. AISTHESIS. That's it.
There you go. Yeah.
Ooh, sensation, perception, or discernment. I love it. Encompassing. This is great. Okay, I'm sorry.
Think about that.
Because you nailed it.
When you have a baby, when somebody has a baby.
Yeah. Okay.
And you see a baby for the first time and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the feeling you want in your life. So when you look at something like flower essences, they soften the rigidity we have created so we can be in that rationalized pathway we've chosen for ourselves, because it makes sense.
Yesterday I went to the botanical gardens here, and clearly, right, I was taking in all the essences, and it was doing all this healing, and I felt amazing after being out there. And I know there was more to it. I just didn't fully understand it, right? And sometimes that's it. And in one way that I'm translating in it, and maybe this makes sense to you, because we live in such an unnatural environment. I'm in this room right now. It's bringing nature into me. I have some more connection to nature while I'm in an airplane or wherever I'm at, right? Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so that's one level, right? So we bring in natural resources. We even try and do that with food we eat, with whole food nutrition that we're working toward bringing more centrally located. The other things that I like for people who are going, how do I shift gears with something, is body work. Somebody touching you. Reiki, Jinshin Jitsu. Acupuncture is one level, and it's working with the energetic of the body. I've been teaching Reiki. I don't know. I learned it when I was in high school. Everything kind of started for me in high school in the healing arts. So I use Reiki on myself every day. And when I teach people, because of state laws that take place in different parts of the world, you can't touch people. But when I teach a Reiki class, it is hands-on. And when your body receives that energy, there is something that happens in that way. And so even somebody touching you on the arm when you're having a bad day, when you put your hand on top of somebody's hand.
Right.
That's presence.
And that's your instinct too.
It's your instinct.
To reach out.
Havening.
Yeah.
The havening technique, right? So that psychosensory healing arts is about doing this with people. We do this intuitively. We do this intuitively when we're stressed.
Yeah.
So for somebody feels like they're in handcuffs, in in their other time,
Right.
when they're not doing that, they can start being in touch with this, with this,
Mm, okay.
with this. There's a lot of ways to be in touch with that. And the more you get in touch with this, now you're calling in that intuitive space. Now you're having a conversation more with the soul of who you are rather than the mechanics of who you are.
Mm,
Doesn't mean you don't pay attention to the mechanics. You've
right.
got to pay attention to the soul of who
And
you
the
are
chemistry, sure.
and the chemistry. It becomes,
Mhm.
mm-hmm, yep,
What I hear you saying over and over again, and this is just what I'm receiving because I have my filters, right?
yep,
Is connection, right?
yes.
Connecting you to nature through the flowers, connecting you to nature through grounding, connecting you to other humans through actual physical human touch, through hearing, through your other senses, through
Mm-hmm.
seeing them. It's all about getting reconnected to people because I do believe, and somebody said this a long time ago, that the illusion of separation is the source of
Mm-hmm.
all human suffering. All of it
Yes, all
is
of
this
it.
idea that we're not connected, and finding more
Yes.
ways to get reconnected is going
Mm-hmm.
to help, bring you back into life, right?
Yeah, there is that space. And then having, I think, clear expectations of what we want and what we need from each of the practitioners we bring into our world to be the four or five corners of holding our magic genie carpet up, right? Because
Yes.
because we need support.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
are moments when we may need the medical profession, whether others agree with it or they don't agree with it. They
Mhm.
want that person to offer that particular thing.
Sure. Hmm.
And they go to somebody else to offer them this particular thing. So that you have a it, they talk about it takes a village to raise a human. It does. It takes a village to find our wholeness. We don't do it on an island by ourselves. We
Right.
might learn a lot that way.
Yeah.
Um, but we at least like other people beside us
Yeah.
and around us and in front of us.
Well, and I think it's important, and this is what I had a discovery of a few years ago myself, that liking or loving somebody isn't necessarily for them. It's for you to feel, for that love to be in you, right?
Yes,
Gives you an
yes.
opportunity to be filled with love, which is healing to you. Be filled
Mm-hmm.
with this good emotion. There's a guy who I had to speak with, and you would never guess that this guy gets into this. He's all tattooed, and he's just
Uh-huh, yeah,
he
yeah.
could take on an entire army himself. And he said that to me. He goes, Dustin, when I get in my car, I practice what you're telling me, and I look at every person and say, I love you. Right. And he goes, it's
Mm-hmm.
weird. I look in the mirror and say, I love you. And he goes, because just having that has changed everything. And he honestly feels like driving is his classroom to become a better human, right? Because it
Mm-hmm.
gives you ample opportunities to be frustrated with other
It's
humans.
very true. There's a lot of loving moments there.
Yes. Yeah. And I just thought that was really cool, right? That he practices that and is willing to admit it. Maybe not to anybody else, maybe just me. But if you can, I mean, that is something to do. It does feel weird at first, right? But it feels great at the end of the day when you do more of that than not, right?
Well, I figure by the time whenever we come to our movement into a next phase, we make our transition off the planet at some point, we've graduated.
Mm,
When I look back for anybody, nobody's going to be asking us how much we made,
right.
right? Nobody's going to be asking us that. And
Right.
and the thing I want to know when I'm looking back, my legacy with people who trust me with their heart and their bodies
Mm,
is, did I demonstrate loving? What did that look like? How did I show up? I will have people, if you get into sort of legality of medicine and HIPAA and all of those things, I probably break every rule under the sun. And I don't really give a shit. Because if somebody's had a bad day, I'm texting them and finding out how'd the rest of your day go.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's important.
Sure.
It's important for me to know that my legacy is, how did I show up for myself and how did I show up for others?
Right. Right. There are ways that any practitioner can do that. There really is. And there's
Lots.
nothing wrong with calling and checking in on your patients after that.
No.
I mean, absolutely not. And some of the best
Mhm.
doctors I know, medical doctors, that's what they would do at the
That's
end of the
that's
day.
they're now starting to do that. They
Yes.
didn't do it for a long, long time. So I think what's lovely about the healing arts, if I look at the full spectrum of medicine, and we're all under one umbrella, because I see all of it as medicine.
Mm,
There's anything that isn't.
mm,
I don't have it legalized that the only people who can practice medicine are in the medical community, because I look at medicine as a whole gamut. We all practice it. So how do we show up in loving? And so I think there's a lot of great influence between the healing arts coming in this way and next generation of medical doctors starting to think and feel, like feel more with your head, think, you know what I mean? You just
mm,
you move your thinking and you're feeling around, so you're using all of you.
mm, mm.
And I think that's going to promote um, greater practice, a larger definition of the healing arts and how we take care of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What you said reminded me of one of my favorite books. I don't have it in here. It's called The Power of One,
Oh, yes, I love that. Mm-hmm.
and where he says first with the head and then with the heart. And
Mm-hmm.
I think too often, sometimes people who are healers get into this and they're first with the heart. And I understand that, and you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you're describing is that people are hopefully, or they're just head, right? They're all just head, and then they don't follow with the heart.
Well,
And
think about it too, though. If when you do consultations and questions with people, I think I feel this way, or
mm,
when
mm,
you ask them how they feel, they start into thinking immediately.
mm.
So the challenge I find for most of us is you have that mind and you have the emotional heart, and they do a lot of storytelling and creating rules of engagement and how we're going to move through the world, and then your chemistry responds to that and your body follows, right?
Yeah.
Well, so behind that emotional heart is your spiritual heart,
Mm,
which isn't attached to any of those things. And so if we could get better at listening to that place, which is the intuitive self, that is what comes in and starts paying attention to body language, to eyes, to seeing if what somebody's saying and what they're feeling is really lined up,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because it's not always. And I think that sixth sense, um, we reserve for only certain moments
Mm, mm,
rather than bringing it with us on the journey the entire day.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people, just in what you just said, who are listening right now, may be uncomfortable with that whole
Yeah.
idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of discomfort with that for people, and there's value in being uncomfortable. I'll say that first, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do we lessen that discomfort enough so that they're willing to take the baby step towards being able to open that up, right? That's kind of the challenge, and in the art, I suppose, what we do as
Yeah.
an individual.
Well, as healers and practitioners, if we're going to start on that level, um, we're the ones who are doing it with ourselves.
Mm.
And over time, we make inroads. What I would love is for the world to stop calling it woo woo
Or embrace woo woo, right?
or
It's
something like
woo.
that, but embrace it something. But how the world tends to do it is by going, oh, that's too woo woo for me. Try it on a little bit first and see how, because it's another source of intelligence that you are totally isolating.
And the thing is most of them have that intuitive, they know there's value, but
Mm-hmm.
because they've had one of somebody who's their authority told them it was woo woo, so they stick to that, right? They stay
Yep.
in that lane because they don't, it challenges their belief system a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because their
Yep.
beliefs were given to them by somebody else, which I wish everybody would challenge all of your beliefs as to why you believe what you believe.
Well, it's a lot of hard work. Right.
Yes.
If you're gonna show up in the healing arts, it's a lot of hard work to challenge belief systems, find out where those structures are at,
Mm.
who laid them down, and even more importantly, at what point did you decide to agree with them,
Mm. And why, right?
and
And
why?
give yourself permission to change your mind, because
Absolutely.
you've got more and more information coming to your life all the time. And so something may have been absolutely a,
Hmm.
a belief that you had to your core at one point in your life. And then later on in life, you kind of get a better understanding that it's not quite there, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So
Yeah,
I
so
would
much
be
fun.
I would be missing an opportunity if I didn't share with you this one thing, because I know there's a lot of people out there listening, and they're looking for things, tools, right? What can we do
Yep.
to move forward? And I have two questions that I want to give everybody, to keep
Okay.
in your back pocket. Because my friend, he was identified early as emotionally intelligent. Tony is one of my best friends in the whole world. The kind of guy you don't see him for years, you pick up right where you left off. And he
Mm-hmm.
told me when we were talking, he said, I was taken to this camp where they would teach me how to be the person that kids could go to to listen to, right? Because he was a natural listener. And he said, I was taught two questions over and over and over again. And he said, the first question was, or it wasn't a question, I'm sorry, it's a statement. And it was, that sounds hard,
Oh,
right? The
yes.
first
Mm-hmm.
thing was validating, right?
Absolutely.
Saying, look, you're going through something here. Whatever it was, and in doing that validation is so important because if you don't get that connection,
Right.
right, then you don't have the conversation. And he
Mm-hmm.
said the next question was, what do you think you should do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because that gives them permission again to own it or ask you for help, right? And I've learned
Absolutely.
over time that if I don't do those steps, I could have all the answers in the world for the person sitting across from me to get rid of all the pain or whatever they want to get rid of. But until I validate them and I give them permission, right, to tell me or to have me tell them, we're not going anywhere. So
It's so true. The Donnie Epstein wrote 12 Stages of Healing. He brought forward network spinal analysis a long, long time ago in the chiropractic world. And in 12 Stages of Healing, he highlighted 12 different stages. And the first one was suffering. You want to acknowledge where someone's at. So just like you said that.
mm,
In our culture, our process when we see something wrong, we go right into solution mode,
yeah,
SOL,
right.
right? We go right into that mode and we bypass this this one important space at the heart of that validation of
Mm,
just being with people in that moment. And and I it's important for all of us to learn how to get comfortable with being in that moment.
yeah, yeah,
Because then once you're comfortable in that moment, then the solutions will make sense because the way that I see that process is
right.
you've now moved because you've validated somebody, you move from solutions, SOL, that very personality earth driven sea level solution, to your soul finding a solution.
Mm.
Years ago, I used to run a monthly group here called Wealth of Solutions, which it was SOULU, right? Like, how are you going to come up with your own answer? And you don't get it unless you listen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Humans intuitively know what to do.
Mm. Hmm.
They either want somebody to give them permission or tell them they don't have to do it.
Right.
Right? Or, okay, you're gonna help me because it feels hard for me to do it.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna hold for you. And
Mm.
you're still gonna be the one who does it. So you still have to learn how to show up for yourself.
Mm. Wow. 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 It's true.
It's
But when you have other people that you're connected to help create that space for you, right? And that's why healers like you are so important because it's clear, right? And you've made that space. You have the crying chair.
I
That's
do.
what it's for, right?
And by the way, like as soon as the tears get released, it's not like everybody's walking around in here like
Yeah, right,
dripping.
right.
Although I do have tissues in abundance.
Yeah.
Um, as soon as those tears release, it's amazing the lifting that takes place, and so laughter happens almost immediately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That part's fantastic.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm,
Yeah, they were just stuck, right? They were just stuck.
mhm.
And that is a means to get unstuck for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we're running out of time, unfortunately. I'm really enjoying this. Well, because Dr. Verzal and we both have our own techniques to be able to help
Yeah,
people in being able to, remove these obstacles to healing. And we're going to be doing another episode in about a month with somebody who does emotion code because there's just
yeah,
many different ways to do this, and that's part of it is finding the one that makes sense to you right now, right? Emotion code may not be right for you immediately, but maybe in a few years after working with other people it will, or whatever modality. But they're
well, when
all
I look at the expansion of the psychosensory healing arts, so when you look at that, it's touch, it's emotional work, it's mind work, it's changing belief structures, it's there's so much to it now, and there's so many different ways to bring it into anyone's healing model. That's what I love about them.
Mm,
And I love that as soon as I something may cross my path and I just get a hit that I'm supposed to do that.
mm.
That's that intuitive listening that we all want to be in touch with, because it'll tell us our best trajectory in that moment.
We just got to slow down enough to hear it, right?
You
Listen.
do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
before I end the recording here, I just want to, if you had a microphone and you had everybody on the planet's attention, right? And you had just like 10 to 20 seconds of something you wanted to share with them, what would it be? Right currently, I'm sure if you think back, there's so many lessons, but right now, what's the lesson that you are processing and you think is important to share with everybody?
Oh my gosh, just love yourself.
Hmm. Mhm.
Just love yourself. Just give yourself credit for all the ways you show up. Recognize when you're being a weenie, and then show up a little bit more.
Any tips on how to figure out if you're being a weenie or not? I mean, it's pretty
Oh, everybody intuitively knows
everybody
when you're
gives
being
you.
a weenie. And maybe have a cookie, because I like cookies. Maybe have
Ooh,
a cookie.
okay.
Sometimes you need a cookie.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. Be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah, give
Mhm.
yourself a break. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I yeah, there's so much that you unpacked for us today. Thank you so much for the
Oh,
time.
thanks for having me. This was
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, I mean, this is the
Super
kind of
fun.
message that can't be, shared enough. And so um
Mhm.
we'll definitely be, reaching out with more thoughts and a lot in this area. And I'm probably going to be sharing more of your lessons in shorter videos. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for giving us all permission to love ourselves. And again, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. God bless you.